And I remember in my time when I was in the police, I remember arresting an armed robber and I didn't handcuff him, just held him. But now it seems to be standard procedure to use handcuffs. So it's something that really needs to be looked at as to why the police need to use handcuffs in situations where it's unnecessary.
Police officers are now being investigated over an incident which saw them threaten a 91-year-old woman with a taser and put a spit hood over her. In what can only be described as a massive understatement, Detective Chief Superintendent Seb Adjei-Ado said, "It is clear that this will have been a distressing experience for the lady involved and that the circumstances raise a number of questions that need to be answered." Well, live with us is Dal Babu, a former Chief Superintendent at the Metropolitan Police. Good morning.
Morning, Luke.
Is this standard procedure for dealing with somebody like that?
No, I think it's a wholly excessive use of force, and I appreciate that we don't know all the facts. But if you go by what we know, we have 6 officers. We have a 91-year-old woman who's distressed, who's suffering from dementia. What we've been told is that she might have thrown a cup of coffee over somebody. She might have spat at somebody. She's clearly going through some kind of crisis. And the idea that you need to handcuff somebody at that age, and you then use a spit hood. So you basically place an item over her head, so she can't see, and then on top of that you handcuff her, and then you have somebody pointing a taser gun at her. And red spotting her, which effectively means that the next stage normally is, once you've red spotted somebody, is that you then press the button and then you press the taser gun. So thankfully the taser gun wasn't shot.
Yeah.
But all in all, it's and I fully appreciate we don't know all the facts and there's an investigation going on, but it does seem to be a wholly excessive use of force.
And is this the reason, do you think, why the Metropolitan Police have said that come the end of August this year that they'll stop attending 999 calls linked to mental health incidents? It would seem they're just not the appropriate people for these situations.
Yeah, and it's a really, really difficult situation because we've had significant levels of austerity, and there are huge gaps in the system at the moment in how you support people who are unwell. I mean, my own experience, and quite frankly, this has happened over decades, was that I remember going to a call with some officers where a person, mentally ill man, had climbed on top of a roof, got there, I managed to get onto the roof and bring him back down. And you would have thought that then everything else, once we hand over to the authorities in the hospital, would be relatively simple. But in fact, the officers stayed with the individual for 16 hours. And I think that's one of the things Sir Mark Rowley has talked about, is the amount of time that there is in handover from one agency to another agency.
Yes. Thinking more broadly about this, though, with this incident, we've heard at length why you might have cause to be worried about a Metropolitan Police officer if you're a woman, if you're black, or if you're gay. But thinking about this instance, the woman not only was threatened with a taser and had a spit hood put on her, but she was also left with cuts and bruises to her wrists and one of her arms after the way she was restrained. Is there an issue with just generally excessive use of force and excessive use of violence?
Yeah, I mean, and the Metropolitan Police is an outlier when it comes to use of handcuffs, more so than any other force. And I remember in my time when I was in the police, I remember arresting an armed robber and I didn't handcuff him, just held him. But now it seems to be standard procedure to use handcuffs. So it's something that really needs to be looked at as to why the police need to use handcuffs in situations where it's unnecessary. I mean, to your point about trust, I think in the old days, the people that used to have concerns about trust with the police were Black, Asian people, LGBTQ communities, young people. But I went to a dinner party and there's 6-year-old white women who were complaining about how they didn't trust the police. So it's a massive problem for the police service at the moment.
You mentioned the issue with racism. Sort of elsewhere, the BBC is reporting that an initiative to tackle racism within policing generally in England and Wales is now itself facing allegations of racism from some of the ethnic minority staff involved. One person telling BBC Newsnight, quote, "It was openly questioned if black people were even needed to work on the plan." What do you make of that the fact that the Police Race Action Plan, launched after what happened with George Floyd in the US, is itself facing allegations of racism?
Yeah, I'm aware. I know some of the individuals have been involved in the Police Race Action Plan. Actually, quite frankly, the people they've recruited to monitor this externally are not people perhaps that have the community have a great deal of confidence in. So in some ways, it doesn't surprise me. I think it's very, very disappointing. It's 3 years on. They're still talking about refreshing the plan, but that's another example of how the police are really struggling with issues around race, particularly, but equality generally. I mean, I can't think of a single example, a single force where I could point to an individual or indeed good practice where the police have got a grip of issues around race and trust. So I think it doesn't bode very well for the police, particularly when their action plan, which they've focused so much attention on, is now beset with huge amounts of problems and trust in its effectiveness.
Dal Babu,